At number 10 we have Mindworm. First introduced in 1974's Amazing Spider-Man number 138, Mindworm is a mutant who has the ability to absorb the psionic energy from his targets and sap their energy, and absorb that energy for himself. The first time he uses this power is on his own mother, who he accidentally kills by draining all of her energy in one go. This traumatic event drives his father into shock, causing him to run into traffic, killing him as well. Mindworm has a tough life in and out of orphanages and homeless shelters, and eventually has a run-in with Peter Parker while he's living in a neighboring apartment. But when Parker notices Mindworm's attempts at draining his psionic energy, he knocks out the villain, who is then taken to prison. Soon after this, Mindworm reforms and becomes good, but is killed by a street gang after having never actually killed anyone using his powers other than his own mother. Honestly, it's a really sad story, and I don't know why they had to do him that bad, but that's Mindworm. Pretty obscure. At number 9 is Spiderside. First introduced as Spider-Man in the Clone Saga, Spiderside appears as a super jacked, massive version of Spider-Man that has Ben Reilly and Peter Parker wondering even more who the real Spider-Man is. But soon, this third Spider-Man soon goes mad and becomes Spiderside, attacking the other heroes in a raving frenzy. He seems to be capable of some pretty nifty shape-shifting, as though he has some kind of symbiotic physiology, but ultimately he's left in the annals of the 90s and not really revisited again after the Clone Saga. My best guess is that he was just too OP and or confusing as a character. At number 8 is the Living Brain. This is one of the oldest Spider-Man villains in general, and especially on this list, and one that very few people ever reference these days. First introduced in 1964's The Amazing Spider-Man number 8, the Living Brain is a supercomputer that continually gets hacked by villains to attack Spider-Man and the people of New York City. Basically, this is what the height of AI looked like back in the 60s, making this villain not just obscure in the world of Spider-Man comics, but in the real world as well, as we are now in 2022. He looks like a dishwasher with arms, if we're being honest. But he sort of makes his rounds a little more than one might expect such a silly villain to. So I held him back on the list a little bit. At number 7 is Typeface. This guy really confuses me because although his name is ridiculous and he doesn't actually have any powers at all, he still shows up a decent amount in various comics. First appearing in the year 2000, Gordon Thomas is radicalized after he returns from the Vietnam War and his wife immediately leaves him, taking their child with her. He then becomes a sign maker and goes off to be a criminal with letters drawn on his face. And he actually defeats Spider-Man during their first encounter by throwing letters at him, which doesn't make any sense to me, honestly. But what's even weirder is that he returns as a good guy during the Civil War Frontline storyline and fights alongside some pretty well-respected heroes like Battlestar and Solo, before he's ultimately killed by Venom while facing off against the Secret Avengers. At number 6 is the Ringer. This is one of those characters that we can basically assume was named before his powers were decided, because ultimately it's a pretty ridiculous power and suit design, especially in the early days. He basically just shoots rings at his enemies, which can do anything between entrapping the target to exploding on impact to freezing. The first time we really encounter the Ringer, he's taken out pretty quickly by not Spider-Man but Nighthawk, losing some teeth in the battle and spending a lot of time in jail. He's then eventually killed by Scourge when he's called to a bar with a group of other villains, which ends up being a trap. Later, however, it's revealed that he doesn't actually die and is revived by AIM agents who give him a cyborg body, and he's renamed Strikeback. With a big enough power boost and a totally different mantle to make him a whole different character from the Ringer is essentially lost to obscurity, making him one of the most long-lost Spider-Man villains of all time.
Coming in at number 10 is Mysterio. I may catch some flack for saying this, but I've never really liked Mysterio. I thought he was really cool as a kid, but that's because I didn't understand that Mysterio's illusions were never really more than visual effects. Mysterio's shtick of using illusions when compared to the rest of Spider-Man's rogues gallery is just simply not that impressive and not that massive of a threat. Even almost every other villain on this list is more intimidating than Mysterio is. It's not surprising his character manages to pass away so much, but it's infuriating that it it never matters because it's almost always written off as an illusion just so we can bring the guy back again. The other problem is that after facing the guy a few times, there is no reason Spider-Man should continue to be fooled by Mysterio and his illusions. I'm sorry, he shouldn't. And bouncing off of that, it's important to add that none of these illusions are created by any kind of superpower, which makes some of his illusions make no sense. I will say he did work really well as a member of the Sinister Six, and I think his portrayal in the Spider-Man Far From Home movie was pretty great, but other than that, yeah. Number 9, Rhino. We're going to the hive of scum and villainy known as Reddit here, with one user who spoke on the overratedness of Rhino by saying the villain was not all that deep or complex, but his character concept, design, and powers are so memorable that you just kinda end up liking him anyways. And I mean, yeah, that's really the gist of it. Alexei has kind of always just been the brawn over brains, and even when he has been given growth and even seemed like he might become an anti-hero at one point, it always has been taken away, forgotten, or just led to tragedy for the character anyways. Alexei started as a basic thug with the Russian mafia before having his Rhino armor permanently bonded to his body. Eventually, and over time, he would be able to remove the suit and even have his intelligence increased, both of which led to tragedies that forced him back to his villainy. The Rhino has gotten by on his iconic concept and design, but he either lacks or has refused the real depth of other Spider-Man villains, leaving people to believe Rhino has earned more praise than he deserves as a villain. I just want to see him become an anti-hero. That's all I want, really. Number 8, Chameleon. As the first ever villain to face off against the wall crawler, the Chameleon will always have a special place in the hearts of Spider-Man fans. It doesn't change the fact, as a repeating villain who doesn't really change up his MO, the Chameleon's appearances can get a little stale. According to the people of Reddit, again, Chameleon is the most overrated because the nature of his gimmick makes his stories so repetitive. There are only so many times that a dramatic reveal of Chameleon having impersonated someone can truly have its maximum effect. Eventually, the gimmick gets old, leaving some to see Chameleon as overhyped. His connection to other villains, though, does make him kinda cool, and his way of fighting Peter is more psychological than physical, which is also cool. Even if he was the first, he isn't the villain you hear people talk about all the time. Number 7, Judas Traveller. The Clone Saga was rough. That is something a lot of fans agree on. While I'm still a fan because it gave us both Ben Reilly and Kaine Parker, I still admit it was rough, and one reason for that was one of its central players, Dr. Judas Traveller, even though he barely appears in the wiki for the story and has kinda nothing to do with clones. Man McNulty from Fansided describes Judas like this, and I quote, "Imagine if pro wrestler Kevin Nash became Marvel's Sorcerer Supreme, got heavy into the works of Friedrich Nietzsche and Carl Jung, and dressed up as though he lived in 19th century Victorian England. In addition, he's accompanied by a quartet of sycophantic groupies called The Host, and often debates with the Grim Reaper from Ingmar Bergman's The Seventh Seal, dubbed The Squire. Oh, and he's also as omnipotent as Q from Star Trek The Next Generation." I wish I was making all that up, but that's actually what that guy said. So that guy that I just described is for some reason wasting his time on the street level Spider-Man, and there is literally no good reason for it. Former Marvel editor Glenn Greenberg has said that pretty much all they knew about Traveller was he was some super powerful psychiatrist studying the true nature of evil for some incredibly vague reason. They eventually just made him a mutant, but also made it so he actually lied about how powerful he actually was, and they also made him just become another of Norman Osborn's lackeys, which seems like a hell of a waste given the potential they had initially given him with his powers. Number 6, the Jackal. Some people just really overstay their welcome. Some people seem really great at first, but then reveal they seem to kinda just suck. The Jackal is both. The Jackal is more so overrated in a publishing sense, as in relation to how much the villain is featured in stories, but no one is asking for that. When he first came on the scene back in 1965, following the death of Norman Osborn, Miles Warren was coming up as the next real major villain for Spider-Man, a villain with a focus on experimenting with biology and cloning. Unfortunately, as the main initiator in that mess that was the Clone Saga, the Jackal lost a lot of good faith, and no matter how much Marvel tries to slick him with a fresh coat of paint and throw him back into the mix, the damage is done. It's upsetting because the character had so much damn potential, and then when he lost it all, no one seemed to really want to give him a proper chance after that. Number 10. Boomerang. Fred Myers was born in Australia but moved to America when he was but a small child. In America, due to his great love of baseball, he developed an extraordinary pitching arm. He became a professional baseball player in the minor leagues after graduating high school, and a few years later entered the major leagues. Within a year, he was suspended though for accepting bribes. With an arm like that and no job, he was eventually contracted by the subversive criminal organization, the Secret Empire, and offered employment. For him, they designed special weaponry for him to exploit his pitching ability, and he became their special operative, codenamed Boomerang. Why Boomerang? No idea, because he's Australian probably. Now, Boomerang's first fight was actually with the Incredible Hulk, which makes no sense at all. Eventually, he would recalibrate his aspirations and take on more reasonable heroes like Spider-Man, which he did multiple times, but notably as part of the Sinister Syndicate, and he even had his own Sinister Six team. Number 9, White Rabbit. For someone so incredibly inept at committing crimes, White Rabbit sure does have a relatively long history in Marvel Comics. In the beginning, sheltered rich girl Lorena Dodson committed her first crime by ending the life of her 87-year-old arranged husband as she found the trophy wife life boring. She then used her inheritance to buy a bunch of high-tech equipment and, being inspired by Alice in Wonderland, she went off as the villainous White Rabbit. For her first crime, she shall rob a fast food joint. This dastardly crime brought her into confrontation with the most fearsome of heroes, Frogman, and she almost brought him down too if it wasn't for the intervention of Spider-Man, who finished her off with an astounding amount of ease. Spider-Man has actually defeated her on multiple different occasions with the same amount of ease, and she's even been defeated by Mary Jane Watson. Don't even get me started on the amount of animal-themed villains she has allied with. In fact, she's allied with a lot of other low-level villains as well, but never to any amount of great success. She does have a giant, heavily armed robotic rabbit though, and that part is kind of cool. Number 8, the Menagerie. The Menagerie is a slightly more recent evil team, showing up for the first time in Amazing Spider-Man Volume 3, Number 1 in April of 2014. This was when they tried stealing a valuable decorated egg from an antique store and were pretty easily defeated. So like from the get-go, the impressive feats are on the lower side with this team. In fact, I'd say the most famous thing they've ever done is when they disintegrated Spider-Man's spider suit, making him have to create web underwear for himself. And it's the underwear that is remembered here, not the team. The animal-themed criminal team was created by White Rabbit, who we just talked about, and its members included Hippo, Ox, Kaine, who did the Spider-Man suit disintegrating, a squid, Swarm, and, wait for it, Pandamania. Very cool. The Menagerie also is known for trying to rob a club where Nadia Van Dyne was celebrating her birthday with numerous other heroes, which, as you can imagine, did not work out well for them. Number 7, Critical Mass. I just want to say that I think Marvel has something against severely overweight people. The amount of supervillains who are just massive is actually ridiculous. We got the Slug, the Blob, the Shadow King, Pink Pearl, the Kingpin too, although that's actually all muscle, and then there's Critical Mass, aka Arnie Gunderson. Arnie was one of Peter Parker's classmates back in the 4th grade, and eventually he gained the mutant ability to project explosive forces from his fingertips, which is actually a really cool power. But that didn't save Arnie from being just a massive man for seemingly no reason. Together with some other evil mutants, he formed the Band of Baddies, and with a name like that, you know we got some real winners here. The band abducted another explosive mutant named Mary Beck, which brought them into conflict with Wolverine and Spider-Man. Unfortunately for the baddies, one of their number threatened Mary, who then accidentally unleashed her powers, taking out every single one of the villains on this team. And we never saw Critical Mass ever again. The end. Lasted 3 issues of Marvel Comics Presents. That's it. He's gone. Number 6, Big Wheel. Hey! Do you want to be a villain? Great! Just hire another guy to make you a big wheel with rocket launchers and all that stuff on it that you can just ride around in. It's that easy! That's what Jackson Wheel did. Can you guess what he called himself? When he first appeared, Big Wheel used his big wheel to chase and try to take out Rocket Racer while he was mid-fight with Spider-Man. Big Wheel wasn't even facing Spider-Man one-on-one, he just showed up. Just before he was about to get crushed though, Spider-Man pulled Racer out of the way and Big Wheel drove right off the side of a building and right into the Hudson River, ending both Jackson Wheel and his big wheel. All of this because Rocket Racer had some blackmail. That's all it was. Number 10. Big Wheel. Hey, wanna be a villain? Great. Just hire another guy to make you a big wheel with machine guns and rocket launchers on it so that you can ride around in it. It's that easy. That's what Jackson Wheel did. Can you guess what he called himself? When he first appeared, Big Wheel used his big wheel to chase and try to kill Rocket Racer while he was mid-fight with Spider-Man. Big Wheel wasn't even facing Spider-Man one-on-one. Just before he was about to get crushed, Spider-Man pulled Racer out of the way and Big Wheel drove right off the side of a building and right into the Hudson River, ending both Jackson Wheel and his big wheel. All of this because Rocket Racer had some blackmail. Number 9. Crime Master. Why are there so many people who have no powers of any kind on Spider-Man's enemy list? This guy just walks around with a gun. That's it! He's another one of the many crime bosses in Marvel's New York, and I guess in that respect he chose a very fitting name. He is a criminal, and he has sorta mastered it. Usually, he employs others to do his dirty work for him, although he did partner with the Green Goblin for a short while before being shot and killed. He has come back from death multiple times under multiple different identities, which kinda made it hard for fans to follow who he is, even if they cared in the first place. Number 8. The Living Brain. Okay, correct me if I'm wrong here, but isn't a brain just kinda living by default? Like, if it's an alive human being, isn't it technically a living brain? This guy isn't living or a brain, I'm so confused! Okay, I'm gonna cut Marvel some slack here because the Living Brain is actually older than almost all of the main Marvel villains. He came before even the Green Goblin. He was created as a machine that could solve any problem, but malfunctioned after two guys got in a little scuffle and it went on a rampage until it was stopped by Spider-Man. It's been used by other smaller criminals, but was always stopped by Spider-Man. But hey, it eventually found steady work as a lab assistant and even saved the Spid on a few occasions. So there's that at least. Number 7, Big Man. I ain't got the facilities for that, big man. You really didn't. Frederick Foswell was a reporter at the Daily Bugle, and well, he was a little guy. Except when he wasn't. You see, Foswell was a master of disguise, and he used a costume that gave him a nice little hype boost in order for him to become aptly named Big Man. From this stature, he can now ride the adult roller coasters, reach the top shelf, and be the head of the crime gang, the Enforcers. Spider-Man works with the guy though, so unsurprisingly he was caught and incarcerated for a time. But Jonah gave him his job back afterwards, which is nice. He ended up dying in front of a bullet to save Jonah, so at least he wasn't all bad. Number 6, Black Fox. This one is a little sad. See, Black Fox is basically just a jewel thief who has had a very long career, seeing how he is now an old man. Just a regular jewel thief? Oh, why is this a problem for Spider-Man? It's not. It's really not. But you see, the problem for Spider-Man is that being an old man, Black Fox heavily reminds Peter of his Uncle Ben, which meant that Peter couldn't help but have a soft spot for the guy. He would let Black Fox go multiple times. I mean, I get it. I respect it. But Peter realized his weakness and stopped easing up on the old guy, finally throwing him in the slammer. While he isn't exactly threatening to anyone, he is the mentor of Black Cat, which does give him some notoriety.
So we're all familiar with Trapster, right? Peter Petruski, the incredibly intelligent chemist who fights with pretty much a high-powered glue gun as well as other adhesives. Well, there's a mysterious woman taking on his moniker. Not much is known about this new Trapster, but she's actually the third person to take on this name. Cool thing about her is that she ditched the E in Trapster because who needs the E? It's 2022. It just looks cooler. This version of Trapster first appeared rudely interrupting a fight between Spider-Man and Vulture, and she robbed the winged villain of money he had just stolen. This may have seemed like a good thing, but she didn't give the money back. She's now a member of the all-female crime syndicate, the Sinister Syndicate, having been recruited by Beetle.
Number 9, Sin Eater. Sin Eater is Stanley Carter. While his costume may have remained somewhat the same, actually pretty much the same, his appearance more recently in the comics drastically changed after he was resurrected by Kindred, who were actually revealed to be the twins. The twins being Sarah and Gabriel Stacy, who in turn were revealed to be clones created from the genetic materials of Gwen Stacy and Norman Osborn. So, not their naturally born offspring. Yay. Then, Sin Eater died, then was resurrected again. The second time Stanley was brought back after he'd taken his own life, he appeared in a zombie-like state, making him almost unrecognizable from his usual appearance, barring the fact that his costume has remained pretty much the same since his first appearance. Although, after rising from the grave the second time, His costume is pretty tattered, so I really think some people might have been like, who dis?
So, as we stated before, there is a new channel we have out now called Most Amazing Top 10 Anime, so if you're into that sort of thing, give us a follow and subscribe. We're putting out videos every day. This next master of the hunt is the ruthless son of Sergei Kravenov, simply known as Kraven the Hunter, the last son of Kraven. Sergei Kravenov, the original Kraven, wanted to carry on his legacy, so instead of having more children, because that would just take too long, plus he already has a daughter, he decided to create a whole lot of clones of himself, 87 to be exact, and attempted to train them in the ways of the hunt. Well, this current Kraven got his title by murdering all his brothers, which, hey, if you want to prove you're the apex predator, killing 87 clones of Kraven the Hunter is a great way to start your career, isn't it? He also saved the skulls and brought them before his proud dad. The son made his dad even more proud when he strangled his father to death while he was disguised as Spider-Man, thereby breaking his curse of immortality. The son has now taken on his father's moniker, Kraven the Hunter, as well as his actual name. Good job, buddy.
Number 7. Kaine Parker. Kaine Parker was initially a clone of Spider-Man who, yes, was considered to be, kinda evil. Chiefly because Kaine didn't have any qualms with killing people, leaving them with his mark of Kaine, which typically was used to kinda like burn the face of his victims. And also because he had long hair and was more moody than Spider-Man, which is a feat because Spider-Man's a pretty moody dude. In reality, the mark of Kaine was actually just Kaine using his spider climbing like little hooks on his hand, as we saw showcased visually in the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy, to burn his victims' faces. Kaine was also seen as evil because he was mentally unstable, having been a defective clone who was rapidly deteriorating, which basically affected his mind. However, Kaine is now known as Scarlet Spider and has a completely different look and attitude when compared to his original appearance and presentation in the comics. While still being, somewhat edgy because he's still Kaine, he's definitely still more of a hero now in the comics than he ever was before.
The original Super Adaptoid, created by Advanced Idea Mechanics, or AIM, was originally a villain facing off against Captain America, Iron Man, of course the Avengers, also going up against the X-Men. It was able to mimic and visually copy anything it wanted, giving it a hero's abilities and powers. But in Amazing Spider-Man 900, however, Spidey faces off against a different version of this shape-shifting entity known as the Sinister 6 Adaptoid. This version of the character sports a brand new look, most prominently featuring Doc Ock's tentacles, but there are other visual elements in the character's design as well. The Sinister 6 Adaptoid is an amalgamation of sorts of, you guessed it, the Sinister 6, having the abilities of Doc Ock, Vulture, Kraven, Mysterio, Sandman, and Electro. The Sinister 6 had been captured by the Living Brain, and their powers and sentience combined to form the villain. So if you thought these guys were strong on their own, imagine going up against all of them at once. Spider-Man actually needed help the real Sinister 6 in order to take this abomination down. Go figure. Also, I love when villains team up with the hero just to because they both hate the same person. It's just fun.
Number 5. Electro. The main Electro we've known for years is Maxwell Dillon, but there is a new Electro on the scene. This new Electro is Francine Fry. She was once the accomplice and love interest of Max, who died as a result of her love for him, and her obsession with villains and kinda her lust for them. While Max's powers were less in his control, Francine threw caution to the wind and decided to kiss him. Their kiss would result in her being electrified to death. However, she'd later be revived by Ben Reilly, operating as villain the Jackal, as part of a plot to help control Electro into basically doing his bidding. Turns out the DNA Reilly used to resurrect Francine in clone form was actually a mix of Maxwell's and her own as a result of that kiss, allowing her to harness and absorb electricity, chiefly the power of the suit that a depowered Max had at the time been given. Kissing Max once more, Francine absorbed the suit's powers, accidentally killing him in the process and becoming the new Electro. Max has since been resurrected, so now even more confusing, we have 2 Electros technically running around.
Up next, we're taking a look at Richard Fisk, now known as the Rose. The son of Wilson Fisk, aka the Kingpin, Richard would boast about how rich and powerful his father was, thinking he was just a highly successful businessman. Now, even if that was the case, come on, don't go around boasting about your parents' accomplishments. Live your own life. Well, that's exactly what Richard decided to do. Upon discovering his father was actually the kingpin of crime, Richard faked his own death and took on the moniker of the Schemer, attempting to take down his father's empire. The two would eventually reconcile after Richard felt bad about putting his dad into a coma. Fair enough. But this brings us to Richard's next moniker, the Rose. He now sported a purple mask and kept a rose in his front pocket and worked under his father, but secretly wanted to dismantle the Kingpin's organization from within. After killing a policeman in a shootout, however, Rose just realized he was a bad dude and allied himself with his father again, but then changed his mind and wanted to take over Kingpin's organization again. Just kill your dad or don't, man. It's a decision we all have to make at some point in our lives.
Number 3. Grey Goblin. Gabriel Stacey has been known by a few different names throughout the years, and has also had his backstory somewhat altered. Initially, we knew Gabe Stacey as Grey Goblin, and later as American Son in Age of Heroes. Originally, he was introduced to us as the son of Norman Osborn and Gwen Stacy, who basically had a secret love affair which resulted in the birth of 2 twin babies, Sarah and Gabriel. However, when Gabriel and Sarah were revealed to be the mysterious demonic villain returning from hell, known as Kindred, we learned that they were actually never really the natural born children of Norman and Gwen, thank goodness, but instead were clones that Harry Osborn had made, using their genetic material to get back at his father, tormenting him and making him think the 2 were really his children, when actually they weren't. It was all Harry's plot, ha ha ha. Not only did Gabriel have a completely different look as Kindred, but he also got a completely different backstory that explained away all the weirdness of his and Sarah's original origins. Which, I mean, thank you for that, because wow, that was bad. It was not good. I don't want Norman to sleep with Gwen. I'm not here for that.
This next baseball player turned villain is known as Frederick Myers, aka Boomerang, and he's gone through several changes, having worked under criminal organizations like the Sinister Syndicate, as an assassin, going up against a number of heroes, and of course, Spider-Man. So how did this boomerang-wielding baddie change? Well, he ended up aiding Black Widow, Maria Hill, and the Champions in their fight against Hydra, and cut a deal to get a full pardon for all his past crimes. That's pretty sweet. He later became Peter Parker's roommate in an attempt to get closer to Spider-Man as he was attempting to find the pieces of the Lifetime tablet. Though Boomerang was lying about his true motives to Spidey, saying he was only after the tablet to keep it away from Kingpin, this was quite the opposite actually, he was working for Kingpin. Despite his deception, however, Frederick actually formed a close bond with the hero and would go on to sacrifice his own life to save him during a fight with the vampiric villain Morlun.
Number 1. Green Goblin. Norman Osborn is often known as the villain the Green Goblin, one of Spider-Man's most iconic villains, if not the most iconic rogue he happens to have in his gallery. Their rivalry is an old one, going all the way back to the first appearance of the character in the 1960s, where Osborn actually first appeared not in his civilian form, but simply as the villain Green Goblin. But lately, Norman has had a change of heart, if you can believe that. It most certainly won't last forever, or at least I'd be very surprised if it did, but currently in the comics, Norman is actually one of the good guys for a change. This is after he had all of his sins purified by the villain known as Sin Eater. Initially, Peter as Spider-Man had saved Norman from Sin Eater, but after being taunted about Gwen, couldn't help but toss Green Goblin to the villain to be devoured, which, I mean, fair enough. But instead of perishing, Norman survived the encounter, no longer driven by madness, guilt, or rage. Having been purified, he was seemingly given a new lease on life, and currently remains one of the few villains purified by Sin Eater to stay that way. At least, so far.
Number 5. Mirage. What's the best way to stop a robber? I know. Drop a chandelier on him. Wow, yeah, I guess that works. Mirage is a robber, but not just any robber. Oh, no. He and his gang had a specialty for robbing weddings. Honestly, who's expecting that? I mean, I wouldn't be. I'd be so surprised, I just give him my money, you know? He made a bad choice though, when he decided to rob the wedding of Ned Leeds and Betty Brant, where none other than Peter Parker was in attendance. Peter used his web shooters to turn off all the lights and don his spider suit. The day was saved when Spider-Man dropped the whole chandelier on Mirage, defeating him. Ouch. Number 4. The Spot. Could you imagine that the first time you reveal yourself to a hero, they just drop on the floor laughing at you? And on top of that, it's in front of Kingpin, one of the biggest crime lords in Marvel. It would be super embarrassing, except when you totally win and make them look dumb. Way to go, man. The Spot. yes, that's his name, had the power to create interdimensional portals, big and small, which he used to defeat Spider-Man and Black Cat the first time they encountered him. But only the first time. See, the Spot can only create as many portals as he has spots on his body, throwing them wherever he wants until he runs out, which he did in this second encounter with Spidey. And then he lost. Pretty badly. He's appeared here and there since, but he never really posed a threat to anyone, like anyone at all. But he did create the failed group, the Spider-Man Revengeance Squad, with other minor characters that lasted like 2 seconds. Hold up, I gotta stop you right there. Just wanted to let you know that I appreciate you, and I hope you appreciate us too. If you do, why not give us a little like and a follow? It really helps us to help you spend your free time watching top 10 videos. But hey, no judgment, we all do it. Number 3, Slyde. A chemical engineer turned super thief decked out in a super slippery suit. All right, let's get it over with. Jalome Bleacher created a chemical coating that basically eliminated the friction between an object and any surface it came into contact with, which, not even joking here, that could be really, really useful. Like, good job, man. Too bad the company he worked for closed their R&D department and Jalome had to find a way to independently fund his project. Honestly, I would have just found another company who wanted to fund me, but then I wouldn't appear on a list of people you never heard of, and that is a goal of mine. He created a suit with the chemical and used his slippery abilities to rob banks and try to destroy his old boss's business. His only other notable mentions were his midlife crisis and his death in a side story of the Civil War event where he was shot in the back for refusing to side with crime boss Hammerhead. I guess you could say that they had some friction. Okay, I'm just gonna slide my way to the door. Number 2, Stilt-Man. So long as I am the master of my stilts, I'm unbeatable. I'm completely invincible. Wilbur, just stop. Just stop, man. Despite being an adversary to both Daredevil and Spider-Man, Stilt-Man just couldn't seem to be taken seriously. I can't possibly imagine why. Oh wait, no, I can. It's the stilts. Yeah, it's the stilts. What's interesting is that if you go into his Marvel Wiki page, Stilt-Man actually has quite a long history, being involved in many storylines. And his stilts are actually pretty strong. At one point, the strength of them was able to plunge She-Hulk so far into the ground, she ended up in the subway. But then she beat him in a really embarrassing way. I mean, just look. His stilts could reach up to 290 feet though, which is actually kind of cool, I think. Number 1, Hypno Hustler. Okay, just look at this dazzling man. What an icon. The Hypno Hustler made his debut in the 80s, which I hope isn't a surprise to anyone. He uses a hypnotic guitar to hypnotize people, wears headphones that stop him from hypnotizing himself, and has boots that emit knockout gas and have retractable knives. What a combo! His story involves him performing at the nightclub Beyond Forever, where Peter Parker and pals just happen to be. Him and his band use their hypnotic grooves to hypnotize the crowd into giving up their goods. Peter Parker, being the hero, obviously knows what's going on and changes into his Spidey suit. During the fight, he realizes the headphones are the only thing keeping Hypno Hustler from hypnotizing himself, and Spider-Man removes them. That's it. Fight over. Number 5, Hypno Hustler. Just look at this dazzling man. What an icon. The Hypno Hustler made his debut in the 80s, which I hope is not a surprise to anyone. Just look at him. He uses a hypnotic guitar to hypnotize people, wears headphones that stop him from hypnotizing himself, which is hilarious, and has boots that emit knockout gas and have retractable knives in them for some reason. It's a crazy combo. His story involves him performing at the nightclub Beyond Forever, where Peter Parker and his pals just happen to be hanging out. Him and his band use their hypnotic grooves to hypnotize a crowd into giving up their goods. Peter Parker, though, being the hero, obviously knows what's going on and changes into his Spidey suit. During the fight, he realizes that the headphones are the only thing keeping Hypno Hustler from hypnotizing himself, and Spider-Man, he just removes them. That's it. And the fight's over. Number 4, the Headmen. Sometimes it just takes the smallest of things to bring people together, and while that may sound like an extremely beautiful sentiment, I'm saying it in relation to the villainous team known as the Headmen, who seem to have come together just because each of their powers revolve around their heads in one way or another. And it's honestly kind of unsettling in my opinion. Bonded together through their weird heads, these scientists sought out world domination, bringing them into conflict with the Defenders, She-Hulk, and of course, Spider-Man. The quartet consisted of Arthur Nagin, their leader, who had his head transplanted onto the body of a gorilla for some reason, Ruby Thursday, who replaced her own head with an organic computer capable of changing shape, which is actually really cool, Gerald Morgan, aka Shrunken Bones, accidentally shrank his own skeleton, including his skull, so he basically just has really baggy skin, which is very creepy, and Chandu the Mystic's head had been transplanted by Nagin onto a number of different bodies through his time, making him actually quite versatile. Number 3, Slyde. A chemical engineer turned super thief decked out in a super slippery suit, Jalome Bleacher created a chemical coating that basically eliminated the friction between an object and any surface it came into contact with, which, not even joking here, that could be really useful. Like, good job, man, that would work really well in the real world. Too bad the company that he worked for closed their R&D department and Jalome had to find a way to independently fund his project. Honestly, I would just find another company who wanted to fund me, but then I wouldn't appear on a list of people you've never heard of. And that is a goal of mine. He created a suit with the chemical and used his slippery abilities to rob banks and try to destroy his old boss's business. His only other notable mentions were his midlife crisis and his eventual passing into the afterlife in a side story of the Civil War event where he was attacked from behind for refusing to side with crime boss Hammerhead. I guess you could say that they had some friction. Sorry. Number 2, Spiderside. Sony's animated Spider-Verse films have not only achieved tremendous success, but have also popularized the concept of multiverse storytelling, encouraging audiences to embrace innovative takes on Spider-Man's character. Within this realm of creative exploration, Spiderside emerges as a rather obscure figure originating from the controversial Clone Saga. In that tangled web of narratives, Spiderside assumes the role of a perplexing third party alongside Peter Parker and Ben Reilly, casting doubt on the true identity of the authentic Spider-Man. Now, as the story unfolds, Spiderside's transformation takes a dark and pretty unsettling turn when he evolves into a molecular monstrosity that bears a closer resemblance to the grotesque shape-shifting abilities of Carnage rather than the iconic traits of Spider-Man himself. His character complicated the already pretty complex story, but he was also actually pretty cool, and I always wondered if we would see him again, and we have with the opening up of the Spider-Verse. Yay! Number 1, Stegron. In the world of Spider-Man, the Lizard was born from Dr. Kurt Connor's experiments with reptile DNA. However, if you ever wondered what would transpire should Connors delve into the realm of dinosaur DNA, Vincent Stegron, known as Stegron the Dinosaur Man, provides the very answer you would expect. After a fateful journey to the Savage Land, Connors embarks on a scientific endeavor that basically creates the exact same lizard villain, but as a humanoid Stegosaurus. Notably, Stegron possesses raw power that technically actually surpasses other animal-based villains like the Lizard and the Rhino. He has crossed paths with formidable adversaries such as Venom on multiple occasions and even forged a not at all surprising partnership with the Lizard in the Marvel Team-Up series. Yet, it's his untamed and wild nature that has occasionally posed challenges for the character. But also, he's a Stegosaurus. I see why I didn't catch on. And number 5, Morlun. When Marvel brought on writer J. Michael Straczynski as the writer of Amazing Spider-Man, I don't think anyone realized that it would lead to some of the most controversial moments in the wall crawler's history. One of these moments was the idea that the radioactive science fiction spider which bit Peter Parker was apparently now the emissary of a mystical spider god, making Spider-Man no longer simply a sci-fi created hero, but also a supernatural one. This meant he needed supernatural enemies too. Enter Morlun and the Inheritors. Essentially, Morlun is a vampire, but instead of feasting on blood, Morlun and his family feed off energy from animal god avatars called totems, and spider totems, like Spider-Man in particular, are their favorite. Feasting to extend their already long lives is pretty much all the motivation they really get. People seem to think that Morlun is a pretty unstoppable heavy hitter, despite the fact that he has been defeated and lost his life on multiple occasions. That was all before his family were introduced in the awesome 2014 Spider-Verse event, but this also explained the reason Morlun kept seemingly coming back to life, and it's all because he and his fellow inheritors cloned themselves, which is totally valid for a comic book, but I still think it's kind of a little bit lazy. Just a little. While Spider-Verse was very cool, I think Morlun and his fam are just a little bit more hyped up than they really deserve. Number 4. Green Goblin. I know this one's gonna pee off a lot of you people. As the #1 villain of Spider-Man, outside of arguably Dr. Octopus of course, the Green Goblin is bound to be just a tad bit overhyped. But looking into the character a bit more reveals that, holy heck, he totally is overhyped. Norman Osborn's main thing is just trying to ruin Spider-Man's life for interfering in his corporate tomfoolery. It's just one middle-aged, shady but successful businessman's pure hatred of a poor, superpowered teenager. Now, it's fair to say that Norman has been a villain to everyone during Dark Reign, but as in most cases, a lot of the time, Norman is orchestrating events from behind the scenes, sort of. The problem is, Norman has been shoehorned into way too many Spider-Man events that he really had no business being involved in the first place. I'm looking at you, Clone Saga, and it's all because he was the first villain to learn Spider-Man's secret identity and then end the life of his first GF, Gwen Stacy. He has dealt some serious emotional blows to Spider-Man, that is a statement and it is true. But still, the Green Goblin's actual abilities are nothing crazy, the execution of his plans aren't flawless, and Marvel hasn't really done anything super interesting with his character in a long time. And even when they do something, like with the altruistic turn to the Golden Goblin, we all secretly know that the character will return back to his same boring villainous self at some point. Number 3, Cadaverous. While a good share of villains on this list are actually some noteworthy scallywags who have done enough to at least earn their place, Cadaverous is one of Spider-Man's villains that was literally hyped up and did kind of absolutely nothing with it. Well, not entirely. Ivan Renz was an employee of Stark Industries alongside his mentor and Peter Parker's parents. They developed the Key, tech that could potentially bring people back to life. But the experiments failed, sending his mentor to the afterlife. Tony Stark dismantled the unit. Ivan eventually became the supervillain known as Cadaverous, only ever appearing in the J.J. and Henry Abrams written Bloodline Spider-Man storyline from 2019. Mary Jane Watson loses her life to Cadaverous on the 5th page of the first issue after Spider-Man is swarmed and beaten pretty badly by him and his minions. Then Spider-Man just completely quits. 12 years later, the story has a one-armed version of Peter Parker who is now the honestly pretty bad single father of Ben Parker, Peter and Mary Jane's son. After Cadaverous returns out of hiding and kidnaps Peter to use his blood for his evil plans, it's up to the new Spider-Man, Ben Parker, with the help of his friend Faye Ido, and old Tony Stark and Riri Williams to fight Cadaverous and his minions, which includes a cyber zombified team of Avengers. But this is all we ever see of Cadaverous, and we never have seen him since. The man beats Spider-Man and we only ever get a 5-issue story about him. I don't know, I'm just saying. Number 2, Carnage. Carnage has rightfully amassed a huge fanbase. He's headlined several comic book miniseries and played a part in some bigger villains events. He even had his own ongoing monthly, but I still think Carnage is also one of Spider-Man's slightly overrated villains. The only reason he exists at all was so Marvel could capitalize off of Venom's popularity during the late 1980s and early 1990s. As a more extreme, red version of Venom, Carnage basically filled in as Marvel went and turned Venom into an anti-hero. After Marvel decided that symbiotes could suddenly asexually reproduce, Carnage was born from Venom, bonding itself to Eddie Brock's cellmate, Cletus Cassidy, who was essentially the Joker, and that's not just me speculating. Eric Larson, the co-creator of Carnage, admitted he just directly copied the Joker and just changed his skin and hair color to create Cassidy. So my point here is that while Carnage is definitely scary, and he has been really cool in his latest stories, he is one part of a ripoff of Batman's best villain, and another part an extreme copy of a much better Spider-Man villain with a fresh coat of paint. I still recommend Absolute Carnage though, I'm just saying. I still recommend it. And finally, in at number 1, Facade. There are a lot of villains who kept their identity secret, with the whole fun of the character being the act of trying to solve the mystery and then being shocked or surprised when it was finally revealed. That last part is kind of an important part of the whole payoff of a mystery, even if it's ultimately kind of a letdown. So needless to say, when a character like Facade, that stands for Full Acclamation Combat and Defense Exoskeleton, shows up hiding his identity identity, and who to this day has never had his identity revealed, people just stopped caring. The billion-dollar Facade suit was created by a pharmaceutical company, which raises a ton of questions on its own, but its inventor was sent to the afterlife by whoever it was that stole the suit. Photographer Lance Bannon did actually get a picture of who stole the suit, but what do you know, in true mystery fashion, the room was too dark to see the face of the criminal. But even then, Facade took Bannon's life just in case. J. Jonah Jameson, Arthur Bryce, and another photographer, Cole Cooper, are all possible suspects, but we will never know because when the suit got destroyed by Spider-Man, the criminal inside the suit still managed to escape without being seen. And then, Marvel had the audacity to have the character willing to divulge his identity to Spider-Man, and Spider-Man decides that he's got more important things to do and he leaves. What was the point? What was it? I got really emotional.
At number 5, we have Frank Oliver, aka Kangaroo. This guy's power is basically artificially enhanced legs. And aside from that, he's just known to be a very skilled boxer who is banned from the sport after seriously injuring one of his opponents. But the way that he gets this sort of lame jumping power is when Jonas Harrow approaches him and offers him the powers in exchange for his cooperation in a highly dangerous heist. While he's infiltrating the Hudson nuclear laboratories to steal some radioactive something or other, Spider-Man swoops in to try and stop him. Well, not stop him, but to save his life, because the room he's breaking into is so radioactive that it disintegrates him immediately upon entry, and Spider-Man watches on in horror as this happens. The Kangaroo mantle has a couple other appearances, but as far as I'm concerned, this event marks the end for the villain and leaves him behind in the void of obscurity. At number 4 is Walrus, another very strange villain based on an animal that seems to have been picked out of a hat. This New York City carpenter's journey in petty crime starts when his uncle gives him powers that marginally increase his strength, speed, and stamina. He takes on the mantle of Walrus and is first shown battling the Defenders in issue 131 in 1984. But he's taken out by a good guy version of Frogman, who at the time is understandably a less respected member of the Defenders. So it really hits home that Walrus is not to be taken seriously. And it also suggests that he was probably never meant to last very long in the first place. Years later, there is an interesting run-in with Deadpool where Walrus gains quite a power boost and actually almost kills Deadpool, but all things considered, he is largely known to be lost to obscurity like the rest on this list. At number 3, we have Big Wheel. Originally taken on by Jackson Wheel, the mantle of Big Wheel is started when he owes money to Rocket Racer, who continues to hound him for payment. So he decides to have an enormous, extremely durable wheel crafted, which is outfitted with machine guns and can be commandeered by a driver. But his first big attack on Rocket Racer goes wrong, and Spider-Man just kind of watches it all go down. Basically, it ends in Big Wheel careening into the Hudson River. But he survives because the wheel is airtight, so he had that covered. Later, Big Wheel reforms himself and even teams up with Spider-Man at one point. Honestly, he's actually somewhere between obscure and quite prevalent depending on how you look at his legacy, because even though he seldom ever appeared in the Spider-Man comics, he has gone down as one of the most enjoyed obscure villains among Spider-Man fans. Okay, coming in at number 2 is Hypno Hustler. This guy is first introduced in 1978 and has a pretty short shelf life, like 1 issue short. Maybe with a couple more later on, but that's his main introduction. That's the only time we really see him. His powers are basically that he can hypnotize audiences at his shows using his hypnotic guitar. Playing alongside his band, the Mercy Killers, Hypno Hustler is first caught taking money and valuables from others in the audience at what appears to be their own will. But alas, it is hypnosis. He's also got these hypno boots that emit knockout gas and have retractable knives built into them as well. It's fair to say that this villain doesn't last very long and is sort of left in the dust after this first encounter with Spider-Man. Later, Hypno Hustler has a brief stint with Villainon, which is Villains Anonymous, where he tries to reform alongside the likes of Armadillo and Big Wheel himself. But that's basically it. At number 1 is Video Man. This guy's a double whammy because he is himself a rather obscure villain, all things considered. But also the technology that this character was designed in reference to is also obscure in itself, so I felt I had to put him at number 1 on the list. In fact, Video Man was abandoned so quickly by writers that his origin story is never even revealed. First appearing in the first issue of 2006's Spider-Man Family featuring Amazing Friends, he is quickly taken out after his his first encounter and reduced to a little processor unit, which Spider-Man says he keeps in his freezer until, I guess, the present day, so as not to reawaken Video Man. What strikes me as strange about Video Man is that he was conceptualized in 2006, but his style is clearly referential to video games or maybe TV from the 80s or 90s, so just a total miss all around. And we're yet to see him again after his first fateful encounter in 2006. Alright, that was the list. Thanks for watching, and please leave a comment with your thoughts. I want to know about more obscure villains from Spider-Man if you know of any. I'll do my best to answer you as usual. This has been Top 10 Nerd, and I've been your host, Ben Ball. You know the rest. Take it easy.